A liberal arts education, historically, has been the means by which young people get an education in the great arts, the great philosophical teachings, the great theological teachings of our varied traditions. It gives them a certain set of skills, a verbal and written articulation. It also gives them some sense of the unity and the diversity of the disciplines that are available in a university, and some sense of the unity and diversity of opinions about the truth. It's a way of shaping, particularly the mind and indirectly the character of young people, so that they're ready to go out into the world as educated young men and women. That, I would say, has always, in a sense, been the general goal of a liberal education. The African-American writer W.E.B. Du Bois, in his great defense of liberal education, I think it's the best defense of liberal education ever written by an American, says that the true aim and end of a liberal education is not to earn meat, but to understand the aim of that life which meat nourishes. It's about pondering the riddle of existence. We all wonder from time to time, and particularly in moments of great joy or moments of great sorrow and loss, we wonder as human beings about our place here on this planet, our place in the cosmos. And liberal education is rooted in a disposition of wonder about the riddle of human existence, about the great questions of God, the origin of evil, human happiness, how we're to live together. It's in the end about those fundamental questions, and always has been. In our time, I think a liberal education for young people is especially needed. I would point to two real problems, not to focus on afflictions of the young, because I think these are afflictions for all of us in our time and place, and especially in advanced Western civilization. The first is that we don't do a very good job today with anything approaching civil discourse. Our default position on social media is that anyone who disagrees with me or my group is both stupid and evil. There may be some people on social media who are making arguments that aren't that strong. There may be some people who have evil motives, but the problem with how we handle ourselves on social media is our default position is as soon as someone disagrees with me, they're evil and stupid. That's no way to try and conduct ourselves in a democracy. It's also no way for us to try and learn from one another in any kind of shared pursuit of truth. Young people have been brought up now in a social media world where this is what they've been trained to think about and the way they've been trained to interact with others. Very unhealthy. The second thing I'd say is that we live in a time of deep cultural and historical amnesia. We don't know anything that happened more than 20 minutes ago and that isn't prominent on social media. So liberal education is a counter to both of these things, right? Liberal education, when it's done right, is an introduction to what we are all inheritors of from the past. And that's a mix of excellent to poor arguments and works of art and great thinking and mediocre thinking. It's also a mix of good and bad, right? Our history is. The problem with our current amnesia is that we tend to not think about the past at all, or when we do, we think about it merely as a series of errors that we in the present have surpassed simply because we're in the present and we're superior to everything in the past. The difficulty with that is that we need to go back and understand the situation in the past and see whether we would have actually behaved in the way we, as we're living now, think we would then, given the costs and sacrifices and difficulties of the past. And we need to also see that there were heroic actions for the sake of justice in the past. One of the things that studying the past gives us is a way of removing ourselves from the pressure of the instant moment, the pressure of the now. Gives us a sense of the past. In some cases, we'll study the past And we'll find that our judgment of that is even harsher than it was before we studied it. Studying the past doesn't mean that we worship everything in the past. The other thing about studying in a liberal arts school like Zaytuna is that studying the past is an introduction not to complete agreement, but to a set of deep disagreements. If you read any of the major authors, and canons fluctuate, which texts are in, which texts are out, but if you read the authors who have had the most impact on us today, from the 18th, the 17th century, the Middle Ages, and antiquity, you'll see that there's deep disagreement. To understand the past is not to be part of a monolithic heritage. It's to be introduced into a set of debates. And that takes us from the problem of amnesia to the problem of civil discourse. One of the things that you see in studying authors from the past in various disciplines is the deep disagreements that they engage in. And you can learn to come to understand your own view better. Indeed, the only way you can understand your own view better is by entertaining seriously the views of those who are opposed to your view in some way. And you can learn to move from your own view to that view and back. Just as I said, studying the past doesn't lead to a kind of affirmation of a monolithic unity. It's an introduction to a set of debates. So too, studying other positions doesn't mean that I end up necessarily affirming those positions, but I come to understand my own position better. All of the authors that we share in common in our Christian, Jewish, and Muslim heritage are authors that took the taking of objections to their own views to be an essential ingredient in the pursuit of truth. The study of the liberal arts helps us to undercut or correct the amnesia that we're subject to now. It also helps us to learn civil discourse. It helps us to make distinctions. It helps us, even when we disagree with someone, to think, there might be a point here that I could profit from in my own thinking and in my own advancing of my own position. So I think liberal education, especially for the young, is more necessary than it's ever been. The other thing I would add to that about today is that students are increasingly pursuing technical disciplines in business or in STEM. We find at Baylor that our students who get accepted into the best medical, the best law schools, the best business programs are students who have some undergraduate training. Certainly you need to study a lot of science to be accepted into a good med school, but it's also the students who have learned to think deeply, to read carefully, to write rigorously, and who have developed skills not just of written but also of verbal articulation. These are the skills that everybody's looking for today. I think the liberal arts, both for their intrinsic value as expanding our sense of our ability to ponder the riddle of existence, but also even if you're interested primarily in the utility of education, liberal arts have a long-term utility that pays off for both personal and professional well-being. The practical utility of a liberal education, I think, is clear from anyone who looks at those who get into the best law schools, the best medical schools, the best graduate programs. There's a clear connection. We find this increasingly at Baylor when our students go to be interviewed for law schools or for medical schools. They don't ask them about their grades. They don't ask them about science classes for medical school entrance admission, right? They know that those students have good MCAT scores and good grades in the sciences. They don't get the interview unless they have that, right? What they need are good letters of recommendation from faculty who know them well. What they need from those faculty who are writing letters is not, this is a good student who performs well in tests. They know that from the transcript. What do they need? They need to know what this person's mind is like. Can they handle complex ideas and difficult questions? Can they write well, right? How have they grown as a person? How are they resilient? This happens at a smaller college like Zaytuna. It happens at a mid-sized research university like Baylor, where at the undergraduate level, the liberal arts courses tend to be the smaller classes where the faculty know the students. Also where there's a greater opportunity to develop those skills of verbal and written articulation. But those faculty are the ones who come to know the students over the long haul. and can write these letters. They write letters that talk about the development of, I knew this student when she was a freshman, and here is how she's developed over the 4 years here. Here's how she ranks with other students whom I've had in class. But liberal education, we find in these interviews, these med school interviews, they want to know sometimes about service projects or study abroad programs that students have been involved in. They want to know about rigorous interdisciplinary programs that the students have been involved in. Why? Because this shows an ability of the students to handle difficult material that's outside of the norm for the undergraduate technical curriculum. They want to know that the students can handle challenging material, that the students can, in a sense, think creatively about problems. Those are all what we would call in the liberal arts tradition connected to the philosophical habit of mind, right? The philosophical ability to ask what I would say is the most important question is the next relevant question. Liberal education trains us to ask the next relevant question. It's not about asking questions haphazardly, and it's also not about having certainty about all the things that you've read and just showing off about your intelligence, right? The intelligent person is able to say, the educated, liberally educated person is able to say, okay, this is the progress we've made, here's the next question. Every business, every medical school, every law program needs students who know how to ask the next relevant question. Those students can show intellectual independence and initiative in ways that students who haven't been liberally educated can't. So that ability to formulate and ask the next relevant question, that's how businesses grow, right? That's how people solve diseases that no one has encountered yet. What's the next relevant question? How do we put together what we've learned thus far with what we don't know? Those are all things that a liberal education, as opposed to a merely technical education, trains young people to do. Now, it would be wrong, I think, for those of us, I'm happy to make that instrumental case for liberal education, because I think it's quite profoundly true. But I don't think we want to, as advocates or promoters of liberal education, make it primarily about the instrumental good. What I say we're doing at Baylor in philosophy and in the Honors College that I used to be dean of, is we want students to come in and develop lifelong friendships, work with faculty and students who are interested in great questions inside and outside the classroom, develop a deep sense of wonder and a love of learning. And as a byproduct, all these other skills that you're going to get, the faculty who can write great letters for you to get you into great medical and law schools, those are all byproducts. What we're primarily about is the love of learning for its own sake. But if you love learning and you subject yourself to the rigors of actually becoming deeply conversant with the tradition of the liberal arts, you will be the sort of person who has the skills and who has the type of character that law schools and medical schools and graduate schools are most eager to recruit and accept into their programs.